Hello guys, to another episode of /Roleplay. We're on chapter 3 of Vampire the Masquerade. This week for the vampire game, unfortunately we didn't have our entire cast. And I seem to be losing my voice, which is very unfortunate. So, we usually have like 5 to 6 people, and this game we actually ran game with only 2 people. We brought in a newcomer. Hi, Steve! We brought him in, and he's playing a gangrel. And he's kind of just, I'm just gonna beat your face in type person. And he plays that for mainly every game he does. He plays the same character. But he plays it in such a unique way that he tends to also be a face character and not only a bruiser. Because all of his characters tend to be very flashy and egotistical and I'm in your face and here, this is who I am. And he, like, makes a staple for himself. So, for this game, we were supposed to have formal court, and for formal court, you have, like, the prince come in, and everyone is, like, very, like, proper and dressed up, and, like, is there, and they announce things, and they talk about things. Well, this time, the prince wasn't there, which was interesting. Why wouldn't the prince be there for formal court? So, instead, I forget, like, the technical terms for, like, the leaders things, but I think it was, like, the second in command, besides the prince, got up there and, like, said about how brief it was and how there's matters at hand that need to be taken care of and everyone needs to be on their best behavior, and that the reason we weren't having formal court, or well, wasn't having a huge formal court, was because the prince was missing. Not missing, but like wasn't there. He was preoccupied. And then just like left. Like, we just totally could have got a phone call that just said, hey, look, there's no royal court today. So, after, like, after that person got off stage, like, the sheriff, like, immediately came to, like, me and, Steve's character and was, like, rips chair from ground, sits on it, and we're just like, oh, shit. What did we do wrong? Like, I'm getting the true death for certain here. Like, what just happened? So, it wasn't anything, like, bad. Like, too bad? But, he was like, he came to talk to me specifically because, my companions from the last game, as you knew, were looking into the medical facility. And, like, people going crazy and all this kind of stuff. Well, apparently we hit a major plot by doing that. And he was like, so yeah, here's what's going on. There's, like, 500, like, homeless people dead. And you guys were, like, the only ones investigating it, as far as we know. So, we want you to continue to investigate it, and tell me if there's something supernatural about it, or not. So, I'm like, okay. Like, of course I'm sitting there like, okay, sir. We'll do anything you want, sir. And, like, in my head, I'm like, okay. So we apparently hit a major plot line with doing this. But unfortunately, my company of people that I have usually with me all have, like, the information. Like, what happened in downtime, if there's more things that happened at the facility, what the labels of the pill bottles were, to tell me what company the medicine was coming from, 3, to give me anything, like, any information based on, like, hey, did you actually look into this more in your downtime? So I'm like, shit. I'm like, the people that I need aren't here to continue this plot. Either which way, this plot would have continued. So it wasn't like I was being thrown this, seeing that they weren't... I almost knocked over my cup of coffee. Hi, cup of coffee. Seeing that they weren't here. So it would have happened this week, no matter what. So I'm sitting there, and I'm like, okay, so what information do I have based on this? So I'm like, okay, Sheriff, what can I do to, like, get to that particular, like, conclusion where you want stuff? So he's like, everything leads with money. And I'm like, oh, goddamn. Because I was like, I just bought finance for the other thing that I was working on, which was the hostile takeover of the plans. So I'm like, I'm working on finances. So we ended up actually taking a whole different route to it. I was like, well, look, if people have news reports of it, there has to be someone who knows more information, because they would have been like, hey, you can't print this. What more do you know? So I was like, okay, well, who do I know that can give me information? Based on my contacts being so low, I have to actually go through the channels in-game. So in-game, I called my boss, called my boss, then called someone, I called my boss, got information about someone who has been taking pictures, like paparazzi. So then I went to where he was located, which was hilarious because he was hiding out in a trash can trying to take pictures. That was great. So, of course, me having the bruiser that I did, he, like, put his hand on the trash can lid, or, like, he kicked it, and it, like, radiated, like, the noise. Oh, it was great. Absolutely great. So, like, he then, like, lifted the lid, or I lifted the lid, and he, like, grabbed the dude and would, like, smash him into the trash can. I'm like, wow, this is interesting interrogation methods. Completely interesting interrogation methods. But, so, we talked to him, and then he was like, well, here is my, like, publisher, my boss person thing. That when we stole his camera, which was hilarious. Because, Steve's character called Mr. Whom, because he's, like, incognito. Mr. Whom now has this camera, and he's going through, and it's, like, pictures of naked chicks and stuff like that, and I'm just like, oh dear God. So he has the camera, which, actually, the camera came in use later on, which was hilarious. But anyhow, this was a long game session, because instead of stopping at 7 o'clock, we were allowed to actually go in till, like, midnight. So, bear with me, this is going to be a long episode, guys. So, I go and I make the phone call to his publisher. And he's some sort of person who's talking with, like, a very Jersey accent. So, he's like, okay, who's this? And I made up a fake name. And he was like, ah, okay. And then, out of nowhere, he's like, you're not with Vinny, are you? So, I'm like, no, I'm not with Vinny. And so, like, I continued on saying, hey, I need to meet up, blah, blah, blah. I need information based on something you might have, so-and-so. So, I literally had a 5-minute argument with Steve's character about how we were going to go about continuing with the rest of this plan. because he wanted to, like, barge in there and be like, we're from Vinny's, and, like, really, like, bruise him up and interrogate him that way. And I'm like, dude, that's not how I roll. Like, you cause a scene, like, no. No. So, he was like, okay, well, you go in, you do your plan, and if that doesn't work, you act like, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to lead this person to you. And then I come in and be like, I'm from Vinny. And I'm like, dude, seriously. This is not how we run things. You need to cool your tits. And, like, literally the storyteller was like, what's your humanity? And I was like, what is my humanity? So I was, like, looking and I'm like, I have 3 mortality traits. And he's like, okay, well then what's your self-control? And I was like, 5. He's like, okay, you don't, like, attempt a frenzy. And I was like, yeah, because the amount of, like, argument between the 2 of us literally was, like, pissing my character off. Like, really, like, pissing her off. Because she's very, like, quiet. Here's how we do things. We're used to, like, masterminds. Like, she wants everything to be low-key as possible. And he was like, I'm just gonna go in and beat his face. I'm like, ugh. So, we end up going in to the Smiling Moose, which apparently is an actual bar. I thought it was a fictional bar that, people came up with for Out of Tune, if you guys are familiar with Out of Tune. So I just thought it was a fictional bar. I didn't realize it was actual bar. So we were told to meet him at the Smiling Moose, and he was like, expecting, because the way I talked to him, I was like, yeah, using my feminine wiles to get information. I was like, okay, I'm just gonna walk up there and be like, hey, I think you have some information I need. So, of course, I walk in there, and he's like, well, why do you need this information? And I'm like, shit. I don't want to be like, hey, I'm investigating this. So I was like, what do I say? What thing do I say? And I was like, well, my brother went missing, like, so many years ago, and he's living on the streets, and I need to figure out if he's dead or not. And, like, I pulled in, like, the waterworks and the tears, and, like, legitimately was acting this out. And I was just like, I'm trying to find my brother. And so, he was like, oh, and, like, mortal weakness, girl crying, yes. So, of course, I'm like, yeah. He's like, I can't help you, but I can give you the number to someone who might help you. And I was like, fine. So I get the number from Marcus for the Post-Gazette. And he's like up in the ranks of the Post-Gazette. So we're like, okay, this is how we're doing it. It's the same story. Screw your, like, beating him in the head type thing. No. So, we get in there, and they're like, the security guard, like, takes us up to Marcus's level, and we talk to him, and again, the sob story. And I'm like, he's not, obviously, like, personally, like, without me throwing anything, like, subterfuge or anything, I'm like, he's obviously not telling me the truth at all. So I'm like, okay, he obviously knows something. So I'm like, well, I don't want to cause a scene right now, especially when I only have Bruiser over there. I'm like, I need more backup. So I'm like, I will just go in, talk to him politely, and then leave. And then at some point, we can come back in and interrogate him properly. So, the thing with that, though, is he works at night, he works by himself, And the security guard was, like, very, like, we're gonna walk you all the way to where it goes. And I mean, granted, I'm pretty sure if you're going into a building like the Post-Gazette at night, the security guard will probably follow you around. So that didn't, like, weird me out as much as it was, like, he was the only one there. And I could have done more things, but, like, I miss clues left and right when playing vampire, because it should have been, like, each scene that you have to, like, pick it apart. And I'm like, I'm just here to get my information, and, like, I leave. Other people are like, I look for a press pass. And, like, he's like, oh, I'm gonna pick up a press pass for us so we can get more information. No, I'm sorry. In nowadays society, someone just doesn't leave their key card. It's usually attached to, like, a clip or something that they keep on their uniform at all times. So, he was, like, of no use at all. So, he at least managed to tell me where the epicenter of, like, everyone getting sick was. So, I just went to me and Steve went to, like, the food banks and, like, the homeless shelters in that area. So, we went to, Braddock, I think it was. And, of course, like, Steve has this notation to be like, dude, there's an abandoned hospital. That has to be where shit goes down. And I'm like, dude, okay. Like, it may be connected, it might just be completely a different plot. So he goes in there and all sorts of supernatural stuff's happening to him. He has the camera and he's using it, like, to take video and pictures to see if, like, there's anything coming out or figures or shadows. And the best part about it, he hit the crematorium, and when he was at the crematorium, he was like, I'm gonna stick my head in the furnace. Oh my god. Because suddenly, whatever supernatural thing there was, like, flared the fire up, and he, like, ran like a little girl right out of that building. Because vampires, any fire can give them true death, like sunlight, stuff like that. So they're very like, no. Screw fire. No. So he, like, ran all the way out. All the way out. And he was, like, sitting outside. Dude, that just happened to me. So, I'm like, dude, I'm just sitting in the car. I'm not going in there. My character doesn't actually have a phobia, but because of how she is, she might as well. Because she doesn't like gross, dusty, dirty places at all. But you think about it, you put a city slicker in the country, what do? There's movies about it. So, right. So he goes back in to the building, doesn't really find anything, and he comes back out. And then we started investigating, like, the homeless shelters. Well, we get into the homeless shelter, and they're like, well, everyone's asleep. So the best I can do is offer you a little bit of food. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, what's on the food table? And I think at this point, it was kind of like the storyteller, like, giving us clues and giving us hints. Because, like, later on, I was just like, she had no reason to offer us food. She could have just been like, hey, go away. But that's besides the point. He also might be putting a false trap in there. So I go to the food table and I'm like, hey, what's to eat? I'm like, I'm a vampire. I don't need to eat. But I'm still like, I want to be polite and give my friend the opportunity to go looking for stuff. So I'm like at the table and I'm like, so what's there? And he's like, oh, it's beans and rice. I'm like, eh. I'm like, there's nothing I can pick up and take with me. And he's like, oh, there's a piece of bread. I'm like, okay, whatever. So I'm like telling him, and it's like labels of boxes. And we found out there was 2 labels. There was the medical, like, Astus, industries, and then 5-star food charities, I think it was. Yeah, so there was 2 companies that the homeless shelters had food and medicine given to. So we're like, okay, well, we got that. Then we went to a next shelter that, like, the windows were completely boarded up, and it was bad. Like, it was just bad. So I'm like, I'm just sitting in the car. You can go in. So he goes in, he talks to a janitor, and then he talks to, like, one of the people who's not going crazy, but is, like, in there because he's crazy. Yeah. So he talks to him, and he realizes that the guy had an allergic reaction to the food, and that was given meds that he's now itchy, but to counteract the allergic reaction he had to the food. And he's not, like, crazy vomiting, like, cramps, like everyone else is. Everyone else is, like, sick and, like, going fucking nuts. So I'm like, well, he has an allergic reaction to the food. Interesting. So I'm like, hey, Steve, go find me a can of food. So he confiscates, like, a can of the 5-star company's thing of food. I'm like, okay, this works. So he goes digging through the trash out in the dumpster, and he finds the food company, but not the medicine company. So I'm like, okay, well, this place has, like, this place is, like, much worse. No one's getting better. Everyone's getting sick. Like, much worse quota of things. So I'm like, there's 2 things that are connecting. 1, the food company. 2, the places that are getting better have the medicine. The places that are not getting any better are literally without medicine. So I'm like, okay, this could either be the same company. Okay, this is how I diagrammed it for Steve, because I was like, dude, listen to me. Just listen to me. So the diagram, there's one company. Okay, so it makes the food to get everyone sick, and then is like, oh shit, our plan didn't work. I'm, like, trying to, like, maneuver this. So, oh shit, our plan didn't work. So company A, the main company, makes a second company or thing, like the medical thing, to cover up this. But keep in mind, it's from the same company. So you got the arrows that go down, you make a triangle. Okay. Or it could be 2 separate companies. This one is covering up for this one because they went, oh shit, someone's getting sick. This might be kindred or might not be kindred. This one might be kindred, might not be kindred type situation. So that's what we have to look into. And I'm like, okay, this is what we'll look into. So actually by the end of the night, I got, like, a crap ton of, like, not contacts, but, like, numbers of calling people. So it was a decent game where it was just, like, the 2 of us, like, going through town. The next game, hopefully we have some of our fellow players back. So I'm like, I have the can of food. I want to see if I can, like, feed it to, like, a street rat and see observe what it does to, like, justify whether they're getting sick or not. So I'm like, I have that. Do that. I don't want to say the hospital was connected with this, so I don't want to be like, hey, it's supernatural yet, because right now it could just be someone wanted to poison people and get rid of them. They wanted to either cut off the food source to the vampires, or it was just, like, being evil. So, yep. It was a very fun game. It was long, but fun. And actually, it was kind of amusing, because halfway, like, a lot of times through the game, people get distracted and they do other things. Well, this game, me and Steve were like, we're gonna do this. we're ready for game. And the storyteller's like, I'm gonna get food, I'm gonna get a drink, I'm gonna do this. And then he started talking about something that was so unrelated. I'm like, dude, storyteller, play the game. Play the game. And it was so funny because I called him out on it at one point, and I was like, you are literally worse than the players right now. We want to play. You're distracted. He's like, I know, but I'm hungry. I'm like, dude, get a massive thing of food, do that, and then let's play. Which was funny. But yeah, it was definitely very eventful. And this one gives you things to think about. So if you have any ideas or hints or tips or clues or things that you just want to be like, yeah, I think this is this, leave them in the comment section below, and I don't know, I will look them over and then see maybe what happens. It's kind of like a mystery novel. So let me know what you think. Who do you think is behind it? Do you think it's mortals? Do you think it's kindred? And do you think it's the food? If you just want to put some obscure random thing, do you think the hospital's connected with this? Leave them down below, and I'll check them out. But until next time, I shall see you later. Bye-bye.